you. So you are in the right place if you are looking for the Scale Up Advisory Board session. So we have a wonderful set of panelists here. We have John, Helen, and David to talk to us about advisory boards. And so we're going to jump right into things. The agenda for today, I will do a quick introduction to the Mississauga Business Entrepreneur Centre, MBEC for short, a quick introduction to our Scale Up series, which this session is part of, and a quick introduction to our wonderful speakers today. And then I'm going to turn it over to our speakers, our panelists. They're going to introduce themselves. We'll jump into a set of discussion questions, and then we're going to take your questions as the attendees, and that will be our session for today. So it's going to be very quick and also very engaging because we have a lot of experience on this panel today. So the Mississauga Business Entrepreneur Centre, we are part of the Economic Development Office here at the City of Mississauga. We are here to support entrepreneurs and small business owners to start and grow their ventures and their businesses and their organizations. And what we do, we are your central source for small business information, resources, and guidance. And we provide things like free business information and guidance, webinars and workshops like this one, resources and tools, training and mentorship programs, and entrepreneurship programs. Some of which include the business advisory services, the digital Main Street program, the Starter Company Plus program, the Summer Company program, which, as the name suggests, runs during the summer, and additional training and workshops like this Scale Up series that we have right now. How you can access our training, webinars, and workshops is through this URL that you see here on screen. So you can visit this URL to find upcoming events, webinars, and workshops, and also view the past recordings if you want to catch up on the sessions, if you want to review any materials, or if you've missed anything any of the webinars that we've run in the past. If you just want to reach out to somebody to speak with, we have a wonderful team. I'd say two of the wonderful team are listed here in Susan and Laura. I'm just, I guess, a team member. I wouldn't say go as far as to say wonderful. So I'm the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Specialist. Susan Lovelace is our Small Business Consultant, and Laura Dunkley is our Digital Marketing Consultant. So if you have any specific questions for us, please feel free to reach out to us directly and ask us anything. And you can follow us on social media. You can reach out to our general email as well, or give us a call and check out our website to take a look at the programs and resources that are already available. But please feel free to contact us at any time. Now, onwards to this Scale Up series. So this session here is one of 8 of our Scale Up series, and it is capped off with mentorship, with a pitch practice and a pitching opportunity in 2022, which is just next year. The Scale Up series is designed to help innovative companies who are using Industry 4.0 practices. So if you are a scaling company with $100K to $2 million in revenue, or if you have patents or you're patent pending, or if you've raised pre-seed or seed capital, then this program is for you. The program is especially meant to support innovative companies founded or led by individuals from underrepresented communities. And you'll receive these learning sessions. As you can see, we are in our advisory board session right now. It is the 4th one of the 8 learning sessions. And on top of that, if you fit the scale-up definition as previously mentioned, you are eligible for the invite-only mentorship, the check-in and pitch prep, and the pitching opportunity in 2022. If this is of interest to you, if you think you're eligible, if you think this is a good fit and it will help your company to grow, will help you to learn, then please, please, please reach out to me. I would love to chat with you more. So if you have any questions, please reach out. All right, now to the best part of today, our panelists. First off, we have Helen Kontosopoulos, who is the co-founder and chief tech evangelist of Odaya intelligence. Helen co-founded ODA in 2018, which is an AI-powered customer segmentation software as a service platform to support pharmaceutical commercial teams make better engagement decisions about their customers. As the chief tech evangelist, Helen brings her understanding of artificial intelligence and customer engagement analytics to help sales and marketing teams adopt AI in their work. So, welcome, Helen. Big round of applause. And next up, we have John Kumendorf. John is the CEO of Avia Aerospace Systems. He is a leader with 30 years of aerospace engineering, program management, and sales experience. John works closely with company's leadership team to chart the path for all partner and customer strategies and programs. John's core strength lies in his demonstrated ability for deployment of strategic plans and collaborative projects. Welcome, John. Big round of
You.
applause. And last but not least, we have David Breckelman. David is the president of Business Arts Inc. and founder of Board Check, a service that helps companies objectively measure and rate today's boards to achieve your optimal board. David is a respected serial entrepreneur, passionate leader, and seasoned executive who helps all from startups to multinational organizations. Welcome, David. Big round of applause. Thank you, all three of you, for being here today. We have a wonderful session. I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce yourselves, introduce your organizations, and a couple thoughts about why you think this topic of advisory boards is particularly important for us to talk about in the context of scaling companies. So first off, I'll hand it over to you, Helen.
There we go. Awesome. Thanks. Thanks so much, John, and thanks to the City of Mississauga for inviting me today to be part of this session. You have a really great lineup, I will tell you. As one of a co-founder of an incubator at the University of Toronto, Department of Computer Science Innovation Lab, I totally understand what it means to give really great programming to new ventures that are coming out. So that's what I was doing for the last 8 years, and also teaching. I'm an adjunct professor at the University of Toronto at the Department of Computer Science and the Department of Mathematical Sciences up at Scarborough campus as well. So I teach at both, teaching product development, design, and entrepreneurship. And in 2018, I think I was at a point where one of the researchers came to me and said, can you read some of my papers? I'm thinking of creating a business. I want a patent. And I'm like, great. You want to be part of my program? Let me help you. And that's what I was doing with all these researchers. Like, that was my job, was to take all that research and commercialize it. And they were like, no, we want to co-found. We want you to be a founder. And I was like, what do you mean? And I was like, what am I doing now? And I think it was 2017, technically. It was around this time, 2017. And then 2018, I went, you know what? I think I want to change my life again. So we put the patents in. We incorporated the company, ODEA, which means journeys in Greek. It means the merchant carries with them. And we do customer journey mapping using machine learning. So it was perfect. It's a journey, an odyssey kind of way. And it was Professor Pericles Andritsos, his student Gal Bernard, and our co-founder, who's CEO now, Philip Poulides, who helped come together as a team. And I was reaching out to Philip as an advisor. The reason you're just saying, why is this important session today? Being someone who realized what teams go through, I realized really quickly that I needed to find advisors to give me, to take this type of technology out of a university. I needed to find data sets. I needed to find industries, and say, where do I fit in? Where can I get a market? And I think between me and Philip, I reached out to Philip and saying, a seasoned entrepreneur, worked for Marvell Semiconductor for many years, had sold 2 startups of his own, I wanted him to be on a board. I wanted him to be my advisor. And when he read the papers and said, Helen, you're starting a startup? I'm in. What do I do? I said, co-founder. That was really important to me, was him becoming a co-founder and a CEO. So it started right away. Who do we bring on to be advisors for us? Long story short, coming to working in pharmaceutical companies, I had connections with the Faculty of Medicine and I had worked in life science, commercializing life science out of U of D. I realized there was, there were a lot of people would come up and say, we're trying to do customer journey mapping in our commercial teams. And, not being in pharma, I have no pharmaceutical background, neither does Philip. The first thing we did is reached out to advisors and people who can help us in that. Who do we get on the board? Who advise us? And one of our board members is the former CEO of AstraZeneca Canada, so Michael Coutet. So bringing on advisors was very important from day one. Who do I need to help me get fill in the gaps that I don't know, and as a company. And for me, that's how I started, and that's where we're at. We started with 4 founders. Our academics went back to academia, and we're a team of 32 now, based out here, remote living. So everyone's living across Ontario, Switzerland, France, and yeah, that's Odea, and that's how I came to be.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Helen. And love what you said there about filling the gaps of what you don't know, because who, when founding a company, knows everything, right? So it's so important to really round out that knowledge base. So I'll hand it over to you, John. A little bit about you, your organization, and why you think this topic is important.
Well, good morning to everyone. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm very happy to be here. I'm John Commodores. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Avia Aerospace Systems. We are a full-service aerospace engineering company with our headquarters here in Mississauga and an engineering facility also located in Montreal on the South Shore in Longueuil. We've been in business for heading into our 21st year. Originally started as a 2-person consultancy, and starting off this organization, my expectation was to just be a small little boutique consultancy company where my partner and I used Avia simply as a vehicle to bill our consulting services. Well, over the years, as we started our business and we started building our client base, we found that there was an even bigger need for the type of services that we were providing in the aerospace field. And 2 people became 3, became 4, became 8. And there were a number of years where we went through fairly monumental growth in terms of the number of people and the type of services that we provided. And here we are today in 2021, obviously post-COVID and a little bit still in COVID and having had to deal with that, certainly a fairly significant impact to our organization because we are aerospace based. But we're sitting with somewhere in the range of about 170 to 180 engineers in total. So I would say, more of a medium-sized operation. But like a lot of people who have started businesses or are interested in starting businesses, it usually starts with 1 or 2 people. It starts with an idea, and that's what we had. We had an idea that we would provide engineering services. And we didn't really expect where we would be today in 2021. So, and Helen was mentioning that when you start a business, we sometimes have the expectation that we're going to know everything. And the first thing you need to realize is it's okay not to know everything. It's okay to not know the complete ins and outs of the financial aspects of a business. What do you have to do to track your expenses, to to maintain your client database, to invoice clients, what are payment terms, what are the contract terms that you have to put together with your customers. All very important things that you do need to know, but certainly having people with experience and the expertise already been along those paths and know those things better than you do, to bring them on board to give you the advice, important advice and experience that helps you to build your business, to grow your business, to know how to properly run your business from a financial perspective. And when we first started, my partner and I, engineers. My background is electrical engineering. His background is electrical engineering. So our financial background is basically how to maintain a bank account at the time. So, but for us at that time, we were fixated more on providing engineering services. Well, once we started building our first customer, we took a step back and we said, well, how do we invoice? How do we set up our contracts? What will the payment terms be? What happens if a customer is not paying us? What happens? What about this? What about that kind of stuff? So we had a lot of questions in our minds as our business grew, and as we grew our customer base, and simply by the need of those unknowns that we needed to figure out, we thought we need outside help, we need outside advice. So and for us, we managed to link up with somebody that who actually ran the organization that both my partner and I used to work with, which was a very large organization here in Canada. He had retired, and I looked him up. I contacted him. My thought was, this is a former top level executive. Why would he want to help me out? Well, one thing you will realize is there are lots of people out there who are top level executives, retired, still working, whatever it is, who would be excited to help you out. They would jump at the opportunity to help you out. And sure enough, when we contacted this individual, he was excited. He was happy to help us out. And he provided over the years a lot of very, very valuable experience to us. And I can comfortably say that our business would not be where it is right now if it wasn't for the type of advice and the assistance that we got from people along our journey of building this company who are on our advisory boards in terms of their experience and expertise. So, I could say our company is a poster child for having advisory boards. So.
Amazing. That's great. And I want to return to that later on about, asking for people to be on your board, because it's such a critical step that perhaps, if you've never done it before, it could be a little bit daunting, right? And that expectation, like, why would they help me when they're running a really big company already and they probably have a lot on their plate already, right? So I definitely want to explore that a little bit further. And this is great. And I think that it's really interesting to contrast the experience of you, John, from the engineering perspective, and then you, Helen, from like a life science and pharmaceutical perspective, and still see the similarities, right? The necessity for advisory boards and necessity for bringing on people with knowledge, right? So definitely want to explore that a little bit further. For now, David, over to you, about you, your organization, and why you think this topic is important.
Thanks, John. And first of all, let me say, anyone who's watching this is extremely lucky to have Helen talking, because it's very current. The concept of artificial intelligence is exponentially growing globally, and executives in that field are I've learned, quite remarkable, because I can barely understand them half the time. But the results are amazing. And in terms of John, I know as well as anybody that the care and feeding of engineers and scientists can be as difficult as anything, given the different personalities involved. And so I admire anyone who's driving an organization of 172 engineers. You've got to be the ultimate consummate politician. But let me say to the audience, regardless of what stage of building you're at, I've been fortunate enough and challenged enough to have been in your shoes before. My family and I have started companies from concept right through to the point where we launch them into the world and sell them to someone else. They are companies that in some cases have scaled globally. In the scientific field, SciEx is the largest mass spec company in the world, still largely positioned in Canada, but now owned by Danaher. We built a company called IMAX, which is giant screen theaters, and by definition had to grow globally. And aside from the building, which has continued on right into the past decade, we also have, over the decades, my father, my sisters, and I have developed a passion for governance, for understanding the issues of governance, and most importantly, the opportunities for governance, and how good governance and good boards and advisory boards can be invaluable to the growth of what you're building. So let me just try and make a few points that I think are worth absorbing, because the topic today is advisory boards, but I want to talk briefly about advisory boards as opposed to boards of directors. There is a difference, and they have different purposes. And all this will do is support further what Helen and John have told you. But let's just talk about that briefly, and then I'll turn it back over to John. A board of directors is all about strategic vision and setting the strategy for the company, whereas an advisory board tends to focus in the 0 to 24 month range. How do we grow sales? How do we build on what we have today, as opposed to the strategic vision? And there's a different set of backgrounds and talents that can be deployed between those two. It's important to remember that one of the differences between boards of directors and advisory boards is that boards of directors are responsible to the company and to the best interests of the company, which means the stakeholders at all levels, whereas an advisory board is really responsible to the CEO and the management team of the company. And there's a big difference there, because boards of directors have both the duty of loyalty, as I said, and a duty of care. And sometimes they can find themselves looking at a short-term issue and finding themselves challenged to associate it with the long-term strategy. So what I'm saying, and I hope it's clear, is that there are two separate categories of board. And the advisory board is one without legal obligations. It doesn't have a fiduciary responsibility. Its compensation is usually different. But it's very important to make sure that they function together. And, our company board check has focused on ensuring that organizations that are growing, or in fact, large multinational organizations, have the best boards they possibly can, but we also pay attention to the advisory board side, because sometimes the two overlap, but sometimes they don't. I think that one thing, if I could give you one message to ponder as we move into the wider discussion, it would be that these boards are the last largely unregulated path to value growth that corporations and organizations and nonprofits have to dramatically improve their performance in a tightened time scale. And we can talk about that all you want, but this topic is so critical, and everything we've built that ended up scaling globally had strength on the advisory board perspective, on the advisory board side and on the board side, but we always made sure that the two were like a Venn diagram, and that there was a clear understanding as to what everyone was doing, and that overlap point was really the value driver that we loved. It was a real hot, sweet spot. So there's a bit of an introductory ramble, and I'm going to turn it back over to John.
That's amazing, David. I think that's a really great point. And I want to ask about your perspective about the purpose of the board. We kind of touched upon this a little bit, right? It's about providing knowledge and filling those gaps in knowledge. And David, you mentioned about that overlap. So I want to focus on the purpose of the advisory board, and what are some purposes that the advisory board shouldn't be there for. So when we think about the overlap of the board of directors versus the advisory boards, what is exclusively the purpose of advisory boards, and what might be a shared purpose, and what are purposes that advisory boards should not be handling?
Sure. John, I would look at it this way. There can be overlap, there should be overlap, but again, it's really about the time horizon and who they are responsible to. Boards are thinking strategically in the long run, but they have to, in order to do that, be fully cognizant of what's happening today and will happen over the next couple of years. Advisory boards are all about as John described so well, and as Helen alluded to, advisory boards are all about, how do I improve this week, this month, next month, this quarter, this year, and how can I reach out to, customers, to partners, to synergistic organizations, to, how do I grow within the scope of the strategic vision? So again, whether you're on the advisory board or the board, there is that overlap point where the advisory board has to understand what the broad strategy is, because then they can execute most appropriately. And the board has to understand how the company is planning on executing, or it can't really set a clear strategic vision. When the two are kept in silos, the company suffers, but may still succeed because they may have two strong boards. But when they're allowed to overlap just a little bit, it's really powerful. I can go on, but I'm monopolizing the time.
Yeah, Helen.
Yeah, David, oh my gosh, I'm like literally drawing Venn diagrams right now. This is amazing. I think you know what it is? It's when you were saying about the difference, being a startup founder, I've had to take a lot of, one of our investors is BDC, and the BDC has given us a lot of workshops on how to run good board meetings, how to, over a few months even, we were doing these monthly meetings, how do you be a better founder? How do you work through, how do you organize it? How do you inform them? How do you do these things? But I think just to tell the audience, only in 2 or 3 minutes, I would say that David totally explained the difference between the board of directors versus the board of advisors for us. And it's so clear because I feel like there's an overlap. When you're a startup, you are thinking about 0 to 24 months. I'm writing this down. You're responsible to us as founders. But our directors, though, are responsible to the company. I was blown away. Thank you so much for that, because it really makes it clear of, as we grow as a startup, the question is, how do we stop being small? And as we grow, there's company strategy of, when you're expanding into Europe or expanding into the US, there's a strategic move, right? There's a shift versus how do we growth hack? How do we get into the ground? How do we create better culture for our company, bringing HR advisors? And I felt the tension between the two. And I think there was always an expectation that the directors have to give us that type of on-ground experience, but I shouldn't be asking them for that information. So I'm learning too, and I'm writing my notes too. So thanks, David. I think we're gonna have a coffee in the coming weeks and stuff, because this really makes a big difference on how you start organizing and just deciding on how to bring on advisors, but also as you go through series of funding. So we're going through a Series A. Our directors are based on the investors as well. Our investors come on board, and that's how we get directors. But not everyone should be a director. They should not be on your board, and should be that they should be just an advisor, right? So there's a lot of negotiation, I will tell you. So that was my 2. Thank you. I'm writing my little Venn diagram now with your notes.
Thank you,
That's,
Helen. John, before you jump in, sorry, David.
I was just going to thank Helen for the kind words.
Oh.
So John, before you jump in on this, I want to, spin the question a little bit. Do you see, does this explanation of advisory boards versus board of directors, is that something that you've experienced as well? And do you have like an example of an individual who might have sat on both? Do you have somebody who was on your advisory board and your board of directors at the same time, or maybe they've made a switch? Have you experienced that while running a VM?
Well, in terms of our organization, we segregated the two, and it wasn't necessarily a deliberate action, but the people that we brought in from a perspective to support us through advisory capabilities weren't necessarily the people that we looked at from a longer term perspective that would be involved with the board of directors. Okay, but from my perspective, and plain and simple, from my I'm not as sophisticated as Helen as David are, but the board of directors is obviously primarily focused on the needs and the responsibilities to the shareholders. Okay, and it's a legal responsibility. They look more at the longer term success of the organization and the longer term needs of the shareholder, right? Your advisory board is more focused on the business in general, right? Like Helen mentioned, HR capabilities, financial capabilities, as I was mentioning. Your board of directors isn't necessarily going to focus on, you have a gap in terms of the number of employees and you should add another 10 employees. They're not looking at that kind of stuff. Whereas your advisory board would say, hey, listen, you have a need here that you need to fill, and you need to be looking at hiring people with financial experience, with management experience, with a specific skill set in engineering. And they're more focused on the shorter term needs of your organization. And Helen kind of said, what does it take to get your organization growing over the next, 6 months, 1 year, 24 months, right? Whereas the board of directors isn't necessarily focused on the shorter term needs of your organization.
So when we think about, a company that's growing, we currently have 22 attendees in a session, and we have we'll probably have a few more people who are watching the recording. So not everybody who's an entrepreneur growing a company would have this direct knowledge of the distinction between an advisory board and a board of directors. So do you think there's a danger where companies might start with an advisory board and then they evolve that and there's too much of an overlap between the advisory board and the board of directors, and how might that be navigated?
I think it, oh, sorry, go for it, David.
No, of course, Helen, please go ahead.
I think it depends on what stage you're at, right? And we're 3 years in. It's very different when you're in your first year and you just need some advisors. If you don't have any customers, and you're not building, you don't have funding, you shouldn't be thinking, sitting there and drawing out all these, it's really just you're hustling. And I think there's my perspective is because we're so small, and then we are that early stage startup going from a seed round to a Series A. And I think getting that perspective from John of having now a large, medium to large company, that kind of, it depends on yours, you're where you're at, but you can't just start making these decisions, and drawing these maps. And I think it's just getting advisors and getting people to talk to. I think getting out that door, like Steve Blank, it's getting out of the building and just talking to people at this moment of your life is more important. It also changes you're in pivot land, and until you settle into product market fit, we just got into product market fit in the last 6 months. It's to us, we just realized it when we can just turn things on now, and we're like, oh, the lights work, yay. And you're like, oh, I can bring more people into the room. Oh, lots of people can come into the room. That is awesome. That's fantastic. Then but when you start getting funding, you have to start thinking in that way and bringing in advisors like David to as well to help you, because these are legal issues. You're taking people's money. So I think as a founder, you need to understand the responsibilities you have. And I think there's a gap in knowledge for early founders to understand your responsibilities, that you're building a company and you have legal obligations. So that's my perspective as a early stage startup founder. So David, if you want to, I bet you have lots.
I was gonna
taking notes.
I was going to try to just briefly build on something you said, Helen, and something John said. Helen, you were talking about, did you say BDC is one of your investors?
Yeah, the BDC Women in Tech Fund. Yeah.
Okay. So just in general, there's a conventional or a very normal build out of boards for startups that grow through to SMEs and that have the opportunity to scale. And invariably, what happens, one of the things that happens, and I say this to everybody in attendance, is people who put the money in want a board seat. And that's fine. The issue that has to be addressed, though, is what skills would be optimal for the company, and then find with the new investor or with the investor the right individual to sit on the board and fill those skills. Because oftentimes a financial investor will just say, well, I want a board seat and I'm going to put Jack here or Susan here on that board. When in fact, Jack and Susan may be excellent representatives of their company, but there might be somebody stronger for the board. And then, John, you talked about the board has a responsibility to the shareholders, which is absolutely correct. And certainly in the United States, that responsibility never changes. In Canada, there is an evolution, though. The board of directors has a responsibility to the company as a whole. And that means that at different times of the company's financial life cycle or operating life cycle, that duty of care and duty of loyalty may shift away from the shareholders into the debt holders' hands, into the employees' hands. And what's great about that, so that we don't get mired in the weeds of boards, is that advisory boards rise above all that. They are beholden to the management team. They have no liability to the company and the shareholders. So you can craft your advisory board essentially to give you the advice or the introductions or the path to success that you need. And I can't stress enough the earlier comment that you would be astounded at how many remarkable people are willing to sit on boards. I'm just in the middle of a process with an organization, and the response from world-class directors to a relatively small organization has been, so far, need wood to touch, has been astounding. And so one should never, if you're brave enough to build a company, for goodness sake, you should be brave enough to call anybody up on the phone and say, listen, here's what I'm building. I think you can be helpful in the following ways. Define the adventure for them, because that's really what they're looking for. And if the adventure is exciting enough, odds are they'll say yes. Anyway, back to you, John.
Thank you so much for that, David. That's great. John, do you have anything to add on before we move on towards kind of David's last point about reaching out?
If I look at how our business evolved and how we started off and how we organized ourselves around advisory boards, like Helen was saying, we were 100% focused on growing our business and figuring out how to keep our business growing, how to keep the lights on, how to make sure people are paid, how to collect the money, that kind of stuff. That we weren't looking at, what's the distinction between a board of directors versus an advisory board, and being careful that they don't overlap too much, and you start muddling things up. That said, if I look back at our company and starting up, that when we would come across key seasoned individuals that we knew would add value to our organization, we were also mindful of paying attention that, is this individual that we're bringing on board right now through an advisory capacity, do we see them participating long-term with the organization? Okay. And if we did see that, then my partner and I would have a discussion around, should we have stock options? Should we have some type of equity put aside for this individual to participate further in our organization, because we see them as helping our organization grow over the long term? Okay. And as our business evolved, and as our advisory board evolved, we constantly took a look at that. And if I sit here 20 years later looking back, if everybody that we had brought on board through an advisory capacity, we had given them equity in the organization, however small it would have been, there wouldn't have been anything left for us, let's put it that way. And sometimes in your excitement of being a startup and having a seasoned executive assist you in growing your business, you may not be looking further down the road as to, what will that individual be contributing to my organization 5 or 10 years down the road. So some people that are going to be on your advisory board will provide very critical value to your organization, but let's say for only a year, right? And after that, the advice that they've provided has been implemented, has worked its way through your organization, and the benefit to the organization of that individual being on your advisory board isn't as significant as it was when they first came on board. And you need to keep that in mind.
I want to make a comment, John, that, like, yes, completely. Like, is this person going to be here for the long term? How are we going to give equity? I think for what was really good is that I had a co-founder who has gone through this and understood how to make these types of contracts. I think for other startups, they have no idea. And I would say all the time, like very young ones too, coming out of university, they're in their 20s, they've never had to deal with this. They've done like one workshop at the university or in their college. And I think I kept on saying, I wrote it down, beware of advisors who ask for 5% equity. I don't know why 5% is a magic word for these advisors. Oh, just give me 5%. Well, and I'll give you all my time to help you grow. Like, these are warning signs, and there should be flags around them, like blue, blue, blue. Like, that the question is like, like, how do we educate these next groups? And this is why it's great having John do this, is how do we educate them to make sure at an early stage, and when you're doing your next startup or you're a company, you're a little bit more mature, and you kind of understand that, but being very aware of, that there's a lot of people who are asking and who are not sophisticated. So there's questions you should be asking about long term. Have they advised other places? And have they been on other boards? And then, you're interviewing them more than they're interviewing you. You got to say, like, has anyone worked with this person? Like, you're doing, like, it's like HR. You're going out and figuring out who this person is, how credible are they, who has worked with them, and things like that. I think I don't know, I'm going on a rant on this, but this has been a big red flag for a lot of startups and a lot of companies, I think, and we've seen it go around. And I think having these perspectives come out, yeah. Anyways, I just laugh always. Beware of advisors, who are asking for too much.
Yeah, that's amazing. Sorry, go ahead, John.
One thing I want to add, like Helen mentioning, you have people say, I'll be an advisor in your organization, just give me 5% of equity in your organization. You need to be very clear if you're having that type of discussion. I mean, clear like on paper, not just a casual verbal agreement to say, hey, yeah, okay, no problem at all. 5%, because every entrepreneur expects their business to grow. So if 10 years from now your business is considerably larger and you had an advisor helping you out, let's say 8 years ago, they're going to come out of the woodwork 10 years on and they're going to say, hey, remember you promised me that 5% equity in your organization? Well, I'm here to collect. And then you're in a difficult legal situation at that point, right? So you need to make sure that those discussions are very clear. And like Helen is saying, don't always look at what the advisor is going to bring to you. Also look at what you and your organization are going to do for that advisor. Also, there's going to be a lot of people who are willing to invest a lot of time in an organization because it's a fun thing to do. They're not necessarily going to expect a big cash payout in order for them to do that for you, but there will be certainly a lot of people that expect some payback for it. So as an organization, you have to figure out, will it be equity? Okay. And you have to have a very, very, you have to really think deeply about that, because when you sign up to give somebody equity, it's for the long run. Okay. Whereas a small organization that is maybe cash strapped and you decide to pay an advisor, let's say a monthly fee or an hourly fee for any advice that they're going to pay, maybe it's going to be difficult and you're going to struggle early on in order to scrounge that money together to pay for their advice. But I'll tell you, you'll look back on it 10 years later saying that was probably a very, very smart thing to do.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. So I want to dig into a bit deeper. And David, I know you have something to add on here. So I want to focus the question because there's a lot of great things that were said. David, you talked about, reaching out, describing your venture, describing the following ways that the advisor could help. And John, you mentioning what you can do as the founder for the advisor. And Helen, you talked about how, like there's you kind of have to interview them, right? It's a two-way street, right? You have to let them know what you're providing and what they can do for you and be really clear about that. And a red flag would be somebody who says they want an X percentage of equity, just right off the bat. So for a company, for a founding team who might not have as much experience going through this, how can they assess the right fit? That those red flags of asking for equity right away, things like the time commitment. Maybe you can build in some kind of 1 year term, and then you can revisit that. Like, what are some mechanisms that you've used? What are some mechanisms that you've seen being used to really try out that relationship and make sure that it is effective for all those who are involved in that relationship? David, I'll let you have the first word for that.
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, to build or address what John said, he's absolutely right. If an advisor comes in and says, look, I'm here, I'm wonderful, give me 5% of your company, just think it's only 5%. First of all, that is a red flag. And historically, my view would be use whatever creative language you can to send them out the door, and then tell them you'll send a letter later. So that's conceptually the right response, because they're in it for the wrong reason. The second thing is, when trying to figure out the distribution of equity, which is really the core of John's comment, I always used to sit down and say, what do we think this company is going to be worth in 5 years? If it's worth, and everybody's at different stages. So if it's worth $1 million today, just to make this easy for I don't have Helen's AI going here. And I think in 5 years, it's going to be $50 million. Well, that 5% has gone from $50,000 in the company to, that times 50, so $2.5 million. And it's very easy to understand that if an advisor's in there saying, I'll move you from A to B for 5%, is it worth $2.5 million potentially for him to, or her to do that? So I fully agree with John. And now, John, sorry, John Lamb, can you just take a minute and refocus me on the second part of the question that you asked?
Yeah, so when it comes to reaching out to people that you want on your advisory board, what are some mechanisms to kind of try out that relationship perhaps, or to make sure that at the outset it is a positive relationship, a beneficial relationship for all those who are involved?
Sure. So first of all, I remember you said describe your venture to them, and what I had said was describe the adventure. One of the first things that people get excited about is the journey and the end goal, not the structure or details of your company. So, tell a story of the adventure that you're about to go on. And in terms of, the nice thing about, and we'll focus on advisory boards because I don't want to spill over into the board compensation side. That's a very different animal because of the risks that board members take as opposed to advisory board members. I genuinely think that advisory boards are and should be less costly because there's no fiduciary duty. And I think they can't be held liable for mistakes in connection with their duties. Therefore, less risk adjusting compensation is required. And if I bring an advisor on, there is a period of time, or if I help someone, there's a period of time where the advisor has to demonstrate that they can make an impact on what the company is trying to achieve. And they either can or they can't. They either do or they don't. If they do, then there's a question as to, well, is this really an advisor or is it an employee of the future? And if it's still an advisor, that's fine. But advisory boards are meant to evolve, and I think John noted that a couple of times. And as they evolve, you don't want to just be. I know a public company that just kept on handing out equity, and for a small company, they have, I don't know how many, 300 million shares outstanding right now, so they're never going to recover from that. And they have anyway. The whole point is, let them prove their value. They're either excited about the adventure or they're not. If they're not willing to do that, it's very unlikely that they're going to make a significant impact on you. And you're really seeking their advice. It's not an operational issue. It's an advisory issue. And anyway, I don't want to monopolize.
That's great, David. Thank you so much. So I guess I really like what you said about describing your adventure. I think that's very intelligent, and I think for me, it's about the story. It's about that emotion, and I think for advisors, they like to see that. They want to participate in that as well. If it was just as clean cut as here's what you get, here's what you contribute, it's not as fun and exciting. It's not as intrinsically motivating for somebody to participate. So I guess I'll throw it to you, Helen. What are some mechanisms to ensure or increase the likelihood of that relationship really being beneficial to all those who are involved when you're making that ask to individual members?
Can you reword the question again? It's a very long question.
How can you ask people and make sure that it's going to be a beneficial relationship to start?
one, I'm going to make a t-shirt out of that venture to adventure. Just so you know, I'm going to do that, David. I'm going to do that on, I'm going to put it on Shopify.
That's my free
'cause that's,
advisory service to you. There you go.
yeah, that's it. See, he's my new
100%
t-shirt.
equity there.
Yeah, he's my new t-shirt making guy, right? He's like, he comes up with he pulls some shapes and he, what's it called? Gets the ideas. And I don't know, you know, I think at this point, a lot of times is, you know, um, these are long-term. I think John had said it. These are long-term relationships and really getting to know the person. And it's, it's a big hustle getting out there and trying to find the right people. This is not just, it's asking people who have invested in you, who do you know? You know, to give you an example, one of our investors from Stand Up Ventures, Michelle McBain, we kept on saying we were having our board meetings and just complaining we don't have enough pharma expertise. We just don't have enough pharma. Like we need we're just running into, you know, we can come in, have these technical conversations, but we don't know the user. We need someone who presents the user. We need someone who really is the champion. Brought on someone as an advisor, short term, very, very short term. Michelle recommended someone, Orchid. Orchid has been in pharma for 20 plus years in commercial and both on the ground and also managing 300 sales reps and, you know, really, really great knowledge. And we brought them in the short term and said, you know, for 3 months, you know, we'll pay, like, you know, how John said, like, you know, we'll try you out, see how you go. And eventually she loved what we were working on. We really connected with her and now she's our VP of commercial sales. She's also an investor. You know, she really came on board. Like there was, and again, this is early stage. And it's also compensation by bringing her on board before was, can you bring us the deals, right? There's always a transactional, can you bring us in those pharma deals? She started bringing them in and we were like, I think we need her full time, you know, because we can't stop doing meetings and we need her managing this whole process. Also that she was in transition, and I want to make that, I think a comment about something that John also made, and also with David. There are lots of great individuals out there. You know, she didn't have to keep on working. You know, she saw this artificial intelligence. She saw machine learning. She's like, what is that? That's not my world at all. How do I get into it? Maybe I could be an advisor at some startups. And so she was talking and figuring out, you know, how to connect with people. That's the relationship building you build with someone who could really drive your organization. And she has, right? Like, you know, so I think, you know, when you're reaching out and it's dating for long term and it's saying, you know, this is a marriage, and some marriages end. I will tell you that. We've had some advisors, we say, you know, it didn't, we're not going into that route. We thought we were going to go into e-commerce. We didn't. And we just put all our eggs into pharma because that's where we were getting all our clients and data. And we had some advisors that were e-commerce and just didn't work out. So we parted ways in a really friendly way, saying, we're not going to that direction. Thank you so much for your help. And that's okay. They have other startups they can help, you know, and we can tell other startups and we can tell other founders, we've got some great people here. If you want some great knowledge, we have them. So it's building an ecosystem of advisors, at least in our Toronto Waterloo region. And I think that's kind of I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. So John, I want to turn it over to you and build on what Helen said there at the end about the marriage ending. Because you mentioned, you know, like sometimes an advisor might only be helpful for a year, right? So the relationship might only be mutually beneficial for a certain amount of time. How have you navigated those conversations of ending that relationship? And how do you make that a good one to end off with, and how do you frame those conversations in a way that is, you know, good for everybody who's involved?
The key obviously is to ensure at the get-go that you both have, your organization and whoever's on your advisory board, that there's a clear understanding of what the level of engagement will be and for what period of time. So you can put an agreement in place akin to a consulting agreement that can be renewable. So, you know, maybe putting it in place for with a term that ends in 6 months, 3 months, 1 year, however you see this individual may be of value to your organization. And also in that agreement, capturing what clearly the relationship will be. You know, like I'm saying, if you're going to be dishing out equity, you're not necessarily at full arm's length anymore. Whereas if you're paying a monthly fee or hourly fee for services, that is more of an arm's length. So obviously when you have an agreement in place where it's a fee that you're paying for that service, you can build into your agreement with, you know, 2 weeks notice, 30 days notice, 60 days notice by either party, you can terminate the relationship. You know that you've got an escape clause in there. And we all want to be friends, okay? When you're building a business, there's no better business to build than to build it with people that you like, okay? But you need to realize that the business and the friendly relationship that you have now with someone may not be the same 2 years down the road, okay? Whether it's a business, whether it's the friendly relationship, it may have changed, it may have transformed. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It just means that as your business has grown, the needs of the business and your needs as an entrepreneur have changed. So, so there are some people that have no issue with saying, hey, you know, it's been a great ride for the past couple of years. We really appreciate the fantastic advice you provided for us, but it's time for the organization to move on, right? And there are other people who are going to struggle, right? They're going to be saying, well, you know, that person, they were really nice at the beginning, they helped us out. But the thing you have to realize, you paid that person, right, for that service. Also, you have to realize you are running a business at the end of the day, and you may be handicapping your business by not making that difficult decision and keeping that person on board your organization. Okay, so you need to look at all the facets of the organization. One thing I want to add, and David kind of led into it perfectly. He says, you know, for the t-shirts that Helen was talking about, he says, well, that's my free advice to you. You know what, if you're interviewing a potential business advisor and they keep telling you that, well, if you hire me, I'm going to help you out with this, I'm going to help you out with that, that can be a bit of a red flag for me. Whereas if you're having a casual conversation, let's say you're at a business event and you come across somebody that could be of value to your organization, and you start talking about your organization, you start talking about some of the intricacies and the issues that you're running into your organization, and they immediately start providing some advice or experience to you because they just want to help you out, you should start looking at that person and going, maybe that's the type of person I need on my advisory board, where the satisfaction for them is seeing your business succeed, as opposed to what's going in their bank account at the end of the month or getting some equity in your organization. So
amazing. So I want to turn over to attendee questions now. I'm going to jump right into it because we have a few, and then afterwards, once we've gone through all of them, I'd love to hear your closing thoughts about the topic, and then we'll get on our merry way. So first one from attendees is, what does or what can compassion look like when having individuals sitting on either advisory board or board of directors?
John, I'll throw out that I'm not clear on the question.
So yeah, whoever submitted that question, please feel free to type in a chat, and yeah,
oh, sorry, John.
no, it's all good, David. If you're the one who wrote that question, then please clarify, and then we'll come back to that question. And then the next one that we have is, um, will the advisory board only be kept from 0 to 24 months phase? Can we keep them beyond the 24 months? What is a good size of the board?
Since that's taken from something I said, and let me just try to clarify that and add another thought, because I'll try to address both those questions. What I was saying was an advisory board or advisors should be focused on what's happening in the company between 0 and 24 months. A board of directors looks beyond that. They set the strategy for the corporation over the long term. You may find advisors that you want to bring into the company as colleagues, and others that you want to eliminate after 6 months. And that's all comes down to exactly what John was talking about, clarity in terms of the agreement. The other question was a good one. What size should the advisory board be? And I'm going to leave boards out of this. It's important to understand that, although I'll say one thing about boards. A board is a cohesive collection of equals that sit around the board table, often more than quarterly, that go through fiduciary exercises on behalf of the company. An advisory board doesn't necessarily have to be, and usually isn't, a formal board that meets every quarter or something. It's a collection of individuals that are part of an advisory board or an advisory pool. And the CEO and management should feel free to approach them on issues that are current, that they feel that the advisor may have relevant skills in. So I don't think that there is an optimal number because you're really talking about people who give one-on-one or more than one-on-one advice to the operators of the company, the management of the company. I hope that's helpful.
John, Helen, anything to add about that?
Yeah, I was thinking about, yeah, when I say zero, like, yeah, what David said is that it's not only zero, it's not 0 to 24 when you start the company. For us, it was at this stage, but now it's short-term projects that we're working on, and we need special advisors to come on board and do something with us that are only there for a short moment. Some advisors, come on board when we're fundraising. It all depends on, what is your short-term objectives and projects that you need to do in the next few months. It could be technical, it could be business, it could be sales, it could be marketing, HR. And we've, now that we're growing a team, we want to make sure we're putting all the policies together, our HR benefits, like a lot of things that I think, I think John's gonna laugh at me and stuff about, it's like you have to do all the nitty gritty now, and it's like, oh, do we have to do all this stuff? Like, and now it's like, no, we don't. We can get other people to do this. But not only that, they're consultants. It's like, I don't know how many coaches and advisors I have in HR to make sure we're keeping our culture. Culture and people is something we're thinking about all the time now. It's become my full-time job. Aside from promoting O'Day all the time and talking and putting our word out there, it's like, how do I keep our internal culture building? So I'm building out advisors now just for HR. Just to say, how do you do that? How do you, what worked for you at your startup? What worked for, what works, what's equity look like? Maybe that's the compassion question. I don't know. Empathy, empathy with the founders maybe, or I don't know.
I have more clarity about that particular question, so we'll go back to that. Yeah.
Okay, sounds
John,
good. So thanks.
Thanks, Helen. John, how about you? In terms of like size of the board, have you found a magical number?
No, I would say that there was never a magical number. Obviously, when we were first starting off, an advisory board of one was all we could pretty well afford. So it wasn't necessarily a case of, that was the right size to have. In terms of how long should your advisory board exist? There, every company's going to be different, right? It depends on how fast you grow. It depends on the people who start the organization, the experience that they have, the knowledge, what they're bringing to the table, and where the gaps are, and how they're going to fill those gaps with an advisory board. One thing we've done over the years is someone who has been brought on as an advisory capacity. We have found that they're a right fit for the organization, right? They have the skills, but they seem to be more than just bringing knowledge and experience to the organization. They seem to be a person who would fit into the organization long-term wise, and they end up being an employee. And we have a couple of executives in our organization now that were originally brought on from an advisory capacity. So you can kind of look at it from a perspective of trying out people before you actually hire them on a more formal capacity to contribute even that much more to your organization. From my perspective, the way I look at our organization now, we do not have a formal advisory board. Okay, there's no one that I can think of that I can say, well, they're an advisor to our organization. Our organization reached a point where it transitioned more from an advisor who was a longer term, meaning like 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, individual that contributed to your organization, to consultants, right? Where they're there for a week, they're there for a couple of weeks, like a real estate consultant, right? That you bring on board, who has expertise in determining, what size of building you need, where do you need to locate it, that kind of stuff. And if we had rewound 15 years ago, would that person necessarily would have been considered an advisor? You know what? Maybe. We brought in consultants with expertise in accounting. If I rewind 15 years ago, would that person possibly been an advisor at that point? Probably, right? So your organization will never reach a point where outside expertise will never be required. Okay, if you think your business is perfect, then you're probably worth $1 trillion on the market out there, and you should be showing the rest of us how to do it. Okay, so obviously, me not being Elon Musk, we still need a lot of expertise, but we don't necessarily bring that expertise in for a long period of time. It's more a shorter period of time.
To give just a point on the how many people we had advisors, I think it was about 2 to 3 maybe, when we first, like maybe one that was really like regular conversations weekly, that was really important to us. But then it was only 2 or 3, I'd say, and the rest we decided they'd be consultants and we would pay, because equity, I think if you go back to your cap table and you keep seeing that name and you're just like, oh, I think it just itches at you, like, why did we do that? Mistakes happen and it's okay. But I would say these are just levels of commitment and what you need. So this is not like 6 people around and it's a round table. That's the board that David talked about. And that is a very different discussion of how you bring them on board and how we negotiate who should be there and who will be the best person, because again, those are long term and they're there to prop our company, not to help us with. They do lots of times. They'll be like, yeah, we'll help you and we'll get you persons, like we'll get you what you need, because we're so early stage. But after, it's a very big strategic push and implementation. So
Yeah, that's great. And we're getting a lot of questions now about compensation. And that original question, compassion, was a typo. It was supposed to be compensation.
Compensation. Okay.
Yeah. So in terms of compensation, I think we kind of talked a little bit about it. Equity versus direct payments. So I think that I want to get a bit more specific. How much should the advisors be compensated if we're paying them a fee? What seems to be a number that works? how do you approach that? In which point in that conversation of bring them on board should you approach the compensation aspect of things? Let's talk about everything compensation.
John, there's no single answer to that because advisors are brought on for different specific goals. At IMAX, when we went into a new country, we needed advisors because the political environment, the financial environment, the legal environments were all different, but they would only last for a period of time. And we really treated them more as consultants, but it didn't mean that they weren't giving us valuable advice that we rolled out into the next location as well. Some advisors are there to coach, some are there to expand your markets, some are there to help your not non-accounting financial issues, some are there to help you create tremendous value in your company that you may not be seeing. Very few founders, here's a thought, I am fully Canadian in the sense that I was born in Canada. I grew up in Mississauga, and I've been lucky enough to work all over the world. But the Americans tend to have what I call a CEO structure. So CEOs of companies in the States, the 0 to 10 million, there are specialists, thousands and thousands of them, who just repeat the process of growing a company from X to $10 million. But they know when their time is done, and they know that they need to go do that again to maximize their revenue and hand it over to someone whose business, an entire career is built around going from 10 to 200 million. And then you've got the people who can scale beyond 200 million. And I hope each and every one of you has the opportunity to meet these people. Canadians have a different mindset. I think my generalization says it stems from the mining industry, but I won't go much further than that. And I think that it's valuable to understand that at these transition points, if you believe you're the one, or your management team is the one that's going to grow and scale it to the next level, you are certainly going to need excellent and professional advisors to elevate your company properly and safely through that. And we're not even talking about what happens if you go public. So there is no correct or very specific answer to what they're being compensated, and there is no specific answer to the number of advisors. And that's not a very satisfying answer. The answer then I would give is you need specifically the number of advisors that you need to achieve the issues or to overcome the issues you're trying to address.
Yeah, David, that was amazing. Oh, sorry, John.
No, go ahead,
I
Helen.
was going to say, David, that's exactly, I love that you brought on that American versus Canadian perspective of, what people hold on to and what is expected as well. I was, I think, a short CEO because I realized I can take a prototype out, but I needed someone who really has taken the prototype to SaaS, right? There's like that. And it's just like, a lot of our perspectives are based on, I have to hold on as hard as I can because that's my title. No, I was like, no, I need the person who's going to be the CEO who's done this before over and over again. Now the next CEO is the person who brings it up to, to go that way. So if you want someone who can build out a prototype and can put out and qualify it and do that, I'm the person, and I'm okay with that. I think it's like, these are the perspectives that we take on. With a question about a question about how you compensate. Okay, let's make it a little bit tangible in the sense, like, at least if anyone's in the audience who's like in my, who has very small budgets, only a few million that we have, that the reality is we have to go by like a little bit below market value. So what would this person be what's it called, be paid in the market? And then in negotiation to say, how do you, what would, if you hired a full-time CFO, what would that look like versus someone who's a full-time, like you're kind of doing a negotiation on a market value. So if that helps a little bit on the practicality, this isn't just like 5K a month or 10K. I've heard everything, man. I've heard everything. This is research of what is happening in the market and then a negotiation. And of course, look, this is a relationship. You want to bring them in. Maybe you're going to be a little bit more generous, or they're going to be more generous because they really want to help you. And that's what we usually get. We get the very generous people who just want to help and say, we understand where you're at and we want to be there in the early stages. I think that's when John said, oh, I can help you with this and I can help you with that. What you said with that person, it's the people who say, let me make a connection right now with you. Those are the people we like. And that's how I, as an advisor, work. I don't ask anything. It's more like, let me make a connection. I have someone who does that exactly for you, because you want to see them grow. You want to see growth. You want to see people like getting out there and doing things. And that's the adventure, bringing it back. Oh man, I'm going to make that t-shirt, David. That's the adventure. I'm telling you, is seeing growth and seeing people excited. And that's what gets me up every morning. So if if that's what an advisor does, or your director, or they're not excited about where they're at, again, use what David said, just, maybe be more compassionate about how you kick them out of your office. Oh, see, I used it.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, Helen. That's great.
Yeah, the thing I want to reemphasize is, when you are engaging people to be on your advisory board, is to be very, very weary of dishing out equity. Okay, to having discussions around equity in your organizations. If we take a look at the show Dragon's Den, and they come on the show and they've got a great idea, and the discussion comes around, well, what are your sales right now? And the person says, well, our sales right now are $250,000 a year. And one of the advisors on the show says, well, I could multiply that tenfold with my expertise in supply chain and the context that I have. And they're going to take your business from 250,000 to $2.5 million. Okay. And we kind of get a little bit biased in seeing that, is that the way business really operates, right? That you look at people who may be key contributors in your organization, and all of a sudden you fork out 20% of equity in your company, and they're going to scale you up by 10 times the size. Well, you know what? In the certain way that businesses operate, if you're into the build and flip type of business, like build your business up and then sell it off, okay, well, having somebody in your organization that necessarily wasn't there from the ground up to help build it up, may not necessarily be looking at the long-term growth of your organization, is more focused on short-term growth, build value in the company and sell it off to somebody else who would run that from a long-term perspective. And as an entrepreneur and as someone who has started an organization, if you're okay with that, great, that's fantastic. The other analogy I can use is, just imagine you're building a widget in your organization and you want to scale up, and you go to the bank and you borrow money from the bank, and the money that you borrowed from the bank now helps you to build a bigger, better manufacturing facility, and you multiply your capacity by 5 times. Can you really say that the bank helped you build up your business by 5 times? No, they just helped to facilitate that growth. So you need to look at advisors from the same perspective. The number one person on your advisory board is you, the person who's actually starting that business, okay? You have an emotional connection, you have a financial connection, you're looking at it from a long-term perspective. It's your little baby that you're looking to grow. All the other people that are looking to help you out, sure, they're really nice people, and a lot of people just want to help your business grow because they want to see you succeed, but they're looking to make money also. There's nothing wrong with that, but you need to keep that in mind also, okay?
I love that, because, sorry, David. The word that I think of is catalyst, right? These people
Absolutely
realize that reaction, that growth, and not necessarily driving that growth, because that's the responsibility of you as the founder, as the leader, as somebody who's working directly in the business. So David, I want to get to the last couple of questions. Do you have any 10-second thoughts about that you wanted to add on?
I was just going to say, and I think it's very important, there's a difference between equity and participation. If I have an advisor come in, for instance, if I'm moving our business into France and I need advice, I have no problem making the advisor a participant in the success of what they are bringing to the table.
Mhm.
But that means that has nothing to do with equity in the overall company, nothing at all. Anyway,
Yeah, that's
that's
great.
what
So yeah, it's kind
I
of
agree with
contingent
John.
upon. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, David. It seems like, there's some kind of flexibility where the compensation could be tied to the direct results of their actions. So we only have about 2.5 minutes left. I want to get through to some of these last questions. So super quick lightning round. Question for Helen: as a startup trying to raise a seed round, how important is it to have an advisory board? Do VCs care?
We're going to a Series A. So we're past seed, but Series A, very important. Your board is important at this stage. It's more of your board of directors, because these are larger funds that you're going after. So I think your board is more important at this stage. I think advisors. I think we're good for seed, but again, it's like, how do you build your business, and how do you grow versus the financial. I think it's again that kind of distinction, because I think it's good having advisors who have done it before that can support you, to get you to the seed. But then when you're doing a larger round and doing larger rounds, then it becomes a very different animal that you have to tackle. So you need very specific expertise in law, in finance, and how to raise, and especially from the VC community as well, is to understand that it's a very different psychological and tactical and strategic. Who do you get money from? Which term sheet to take? Which is the best offer? Those are all conversations you're having on the phone, and you're just continuously texting people. It's very
Gotcha.
yeah.
And the person who submitted that question, they're about to raise their seed round. So it seems like at that early stage, it's great to have big names on the board, but if your business isn't growing, if you're not actually doing anything to move the business forward, if you don't actually have the traction to customers to prove that you're doing something, it doesn't matter what kind of big names you have on the board, right? At the end of the day, it comes down to the evidence and the actual growth of the company. So that's fantastic. And I think that's going to be true for, whichever round you're raising. It's about how well the business is doing, not about who you have on the board, advisory board or board of directors. Um, there's an individual who's looking to replace their accountant who is on their advisory board. Best approach? Any 5 seconds thoughts about how to replace that individual?
Well, I guess it depends on whether there's, like I mentioned, if there's equity in the agreement. If it's just, accountancy fees, you got to learn how to bite the bullet, right? You have to learn that, your business evolves, and the advice that they were providing or the expertise that they have at when your business was starting may not be the type of advice or guidance that you need as your business grows.
Amazing. So bite the bullet, have that conversation, and be compassionate.
Hmm.
So we have maybe about 30 seconds left. Closing thoughts. Thank you, John, for being here. Thank you, Helen, for being here. Closing thoughts. Of course, thank you, David, for being here. I'm going to give you the last word as the founder of a company called Board Check. Quickly, 10 seconds. What would you have to say as a closing thought for the audience members we have here and also the viewers who are watching the recording?
Oh, sure. Board check is all about really self-assessing your board, but in a way that removes any subjectivity. And it's been tremendously successful north, south of the border, from public companies, private companies, nonprofits, regulatory bodies, universities, but also small companies. Essentially, and I'll just give you a very loose example. We just finished a very large product for one of the 50 largest organizations in Canada. Um, we constructed, along with the chair and the CEO, the kinds of forward-looking strategic vision questions that should be asked, and then we removed all subjectivity from those questions, so that what would happen at the end of the day was the organization would understand whether their board was equipped to move the organization forward the way they needed to move. And the results were both astoundingly positive, but also surprisingly horrendous to the organization, because they realize there's significant change that has to occur over the coming years. And then I'll say one more thing. We also take the time to layer in, because it's so important, diversity, inclusion, and inclusion the way it should be defined at a board. So the point is, there's a lot of work to be done, even with some of the largest organizations in North America, and even those who are well positioned. And remember, they compose their own questions. Once they do their self-reflection, which should happen every year, whether it's board check or another solution, it's astonishing what you can learn about your board and whether it's well positioned. So that's
Amazing.
But this is not this shouldn't be an advertisement for board check. This is really talking about the power and how to construct advisory boards.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And what I picked up from that was that objective aspect of trying to, and similar to what John was saying about being, looking at building that business, and that's what you're focused on. So thank you so much, John. Thank you so much, Helen. Thank you so much, David, for being here. Everybody who's here, we look forward to seeing you next week at our session about repeatable marketing and sales processes. This is the end of today. Thank you for giving your time, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And we'll see you next time. Thank
Thanks
you.
again,
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.